Welcome, everyone. I'm Bryce Gorman. I'm the fundraising educator for Local History Services. We're going to give it just a second for all the participants to come online. So just bear with us for one moment. Hi, Katie. Good to have you here. Deb, good to see you. Brandy, you as well. We'll give it just a moment. Hello, Karen.
Hello.
All right. Hello, Marjorie and Kelly. Good to have y'all here. We will get started in just a moment. I know sometimes it takes us a couple extra minutes to get things started, but I'm going to share my screen with everyone because I think that our background is very nice and really pops with my shirt color for some reason. So just to let everyone know, we are, this is the Heritage Support Grants Project Grants webinar. And all of this is made possible by Lilly Endowment. They have funded the whole Heritage Support Grants program, along with my position as fundraising educator. And that covers free consultations, site visits when that is possible, and webinars and workshops. So thank you very much to Lilly Endowment. So today you are welcome to ask any questions you want in the chat box. We will have a Q&A at the very end, but Karen will be monitoring the chat. And so you can jump in whenever you need. As part of the webinar, you will be muted. So if you do have a question, it is best to use the chat box. However, if you do want to ask me a question later on, I'll have my contact information for everyone at the very end. And I'll let everyone know that I am recording this webinar. Once we are done, I will send the recording out along with a few other pieces of information to everyone. So you will have the ability to rewatch me a dozen times if you wish. With that, I'd like to introduce Karen, who will be my co-presenter today.
So my name is Karen Tapal. I'm the manager of Local History Services, and I serve as one of the grant coaches. So I'm just kind of second chairing things today. I am here to help out if you have any technical issues or anything like that. So as Bryce pointed out, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them into the chat. I will keep an eye on those. If it's something that I can answer, you might get an answer in the chat. Or I will bring it up either to Bryce in the moment or towards the end. So I will keep an eye on all of those. And as Bryce mentioned, since we are recording it, if you would prefer to submit a question anonymously, you can do that in the Q&A section. So the chat, it will come up with who asked the question. In the Q&A, you can submit a question anonymously. So I will be watching those as well. And same thing, I might answer them if I can. Most of the time, I will probably just be holding on to them and answering or providing them to Bryce at the end when there's the Q&A section. So I will be disappearing until the end.
Thank you so much, Karen. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually stop my video. We found that this is a better way for anyone who has spotty internet to be able to view a webinar and listen in without any disruptions is to hide the video. So I will be back towards the end. So pardon me, there we go. Okay, so here's an overview of what we're going to cover today. We are going to go through the webinar process, so the basics, but we'll also look at all of the the questions and the all the components of the project grants. We will talk about the necessary attachments, the requirements for a project grant, as well as the cash match. And we will look at the reporting requirements. Just a quick note, if you have questions about the general HSG process, I did have a webinar on Friday that goes over all of the grant program kind of in general terms. We're not going to get into the questions for each type of grant the way for Fridays. We didn't get into all the questions the way we will today. But if you do want to watch that webinar for the general overview, or if you'd like the slides, just let me know, shoot me an email, give me a call, whatever, and I can send that recording to you. So for the project grants, let's start with kind of an overview, and so we can talk about the structure of the grants, along with the funding priorities and the eligibility requirements. Project grants range from $5,000 to $50,000. They require a 15% cash match, as well as 100% board support in the organization. We will talk about all of these individually. So the board support can be financial support or volunteer hours. With the project grant process, there is a multi-step process. The first is the summary proposal. You can see here, I've got a flow chart. So the summary proposal is much like an executive summary. It's a way to look at a general overview of your project, make sure it fits within our guidelines and our funding priorities. It's similar to a letter of intent that you might have seen with many other grant programs. This is a required step, and if after reviewing your summary proposal, the review committee feels that it meets the HSG objectives, then you'll be invited to submit a full proposal. The full proposals are usually due about 2 months, 6 weeks to 8 weeks after the summary proposal deadline. So the full proposal is going to have more detailed questions. This is where you'll attach a budget, letters of, any kind of letters, or maybe quotes from contractors. Any of this would be in the full proposal. So the summary is much faster. A project grant has a 12-month default spending period. This is the default. If you have a project that will take less than 12 months, that is perfectly fine. You don't have to take the entire time. If you have a project that will take more, we do urge you to phase those projects into chunks that can be funded within that spending period. And so the total turnover time between that summary proposal and sending out or making all the funding agreements and getting the checks out is roughly, it's a couple months. So the full proposals are reviewed by a review panel that's made up of it's made up of museum colleagues. These will be people from the museum industry. These will be people who are local history partners. It is not me. It is not Karen. It's not any of the coaches. And then the review panel makes their agreements, and grant awards are sent out. After, let's hope that everyone here receives grant funding. You will be required to submit a midpoint report after 6 months. It is a very quick, it's about a 9-question Microsoft Forms report. It's just to make sure that you're on track. And if there are any things that we can do to offer assistance, that we can know at the halfway point rather than at the end. And then after that 12-month period, you will have a final report. So we will go into all of those. So in order to be eligible, an organization must be incorporated in the state of Indiana as a 501c3 nonprofit. This is a federal designation. It's one that you would get an IRS determination letter for. Um, any organization that applies must have an annual operating budget less than 300,000, and your organization must reflect history as a significant component of your mission or propose a project which is history focused. So in order to determine whether a project is history focused, we like to use this definition here. A history focused project interprets, presents, or otherwise disseminates a historical narrative or information. So within that, you might notice that there is the asterisk. If an organization is operating under a larger parent organization, it's usually eligible through a friends group. And this is most common if you notice libraries often have the Friends of Knox County Public Library or the Friends of Marion County Library or whichever, a group that is there to provide volunteering or fundraising for an entity. You are eligible to apply through the Friends group. We do not allow for financial sponsors. If you do, if you do request funds through a Friends group, we will require that you supply a letter from the parent organization confirming that they are on board with the project, they support it, that all of the Heritage Support Grant funds will be distributed through the Friends group, and that at least one member of that Friends group will be on the project team. They don't have to be the project manager if that's not the best fit, but there must be people from the Friends group on the team. So if you have questions about this, I know this usually brings up some questions. Please, view the HSG overview webinar that I had on Friday, or email me, or email your coach. Our funding priorities are what you would call intentionally broad. We realize that organizations have many different funding priorities and needs, and we want these grants to be as impactful as possible. So for this reason, we've identified 4 really broad areas for funding. The first and the most common is the collection stewardship. So I will read these definitions for anyone listening in. Projects in this category address the storage, management, and care for collections and associated documentation entrusted to the organization's care. This might include conservation of historic objects, preservation of a structure or landscapes, and honestly, this might be something that is very straightforward, like collection storage materials. We will look at, say, a historic structure that needs a very common project is a new roof. These would all fit within collection stewardship. Diversity, equity, access, and inclusion is one of our funding priorities. So these projects focus on efforts to ensure that diverse individuals fully participate in all aspects of organizational work, broaden organizations beyond public accommodations, and work to achieve genuine inclusion. So genuine inclusion is the key word. And really that depends on your community's needs. Communities with a larger immigrant population might prioritize bilingual signage, while an organization with, say, an older population might prioritize an accessibility project. Any DEAI project will really depend on your community's needs. Sustainability is another funding priority. This includes projects that focus on identifying and accessing internal and external resources the organization needs to achieve goals and improve sustainability. These projects meet the needs of the present without compromising its ability to meet future needs. Successful completion of a sustainable project sets the organization up for greater capacity to take important next steps. I think a good example of a sustainability project might be a reinterpretation of an exhibit space. So a project like that would set the organization up for future success, bringing in more visitors, bringing in more publicity, bringing in more funders. So when you're thinking about sustainability, it could be what is going to help you achieve your goals, your next steps. And finally, we have planning. Planning projects identify organizational objectives and assess capacity. We have had several organizations receive HSG funding for collections assessments, museum assessments, historic structures reports, or other materials that can help them plan for future projects. I think for a lot of organizations, if this is your first time applying for Heritage Support Grant funding, planning projects are a great way to get started, especially if you don't have a collections assessment or an assessment of, say, a historic structure that you would like to preserve. These are a great way to get started with heritage support grants. We can talk about all of that at different, later on. Before I move on to this, let me say there are several expenses that are not eligible for HSG funding. Most of these would be considered general operating expenses, rent, utilities, insurance, salaries, wages, benefits for permanent staff. We do not allow items for resale. So for, say, your gift shop, building purchase, or retiring organizational debt. Now, an organization can request funding for temporary project-specific personnel or consultants. We don't fund the permanent staff. We do not allow for percentages of permanent staff salary to be covered by the grant, but your grant coach can help you work out the details for a proposal that includes personnel. I would encourage everyone who is thinking about this to watch the HSG overview webinar for more details about it. And if you have any questions specific to your project, please reach out to us. So with that, if you do need any help registering in our grant portal, please contact me. Again, you can refer to the HSG overview. So you can access the online grant portal through the HSG website, indianahistory.org/grants. And once you have logged into the online grant portal, you'll see a screen like this. You can click the Start the Project Grant link. This is the one circled or squared in red. It's going to take you to the summary of proposal. Once you start an application, it is highly recommended to copy your answers into a separate Word document. We never anticipate there being problems or an outage or anything like that. But as I mentioned with the video, there are occasions where people have spotty internet. There are occasions where a computer just decides randomly to restart itself. That happened to me last week. And so it's always good to have a backup. So we recommend using a Word document. Also, if you are going to work on a document over a couple days, which we also recommend giving it time, fill out every field. You can use something like a word like test, or just something like your name, so it'll catch your eye so you know to fill out that field. But it is best to fill out all the fields before saving, and then you can go through and correct them afterwards. So just a reminder, the summary of proposal is required for all project grants. This provides the review committee with an overview of the project need, your solution, and the anticipated results. So projects that meet the eligibility requirements and funding priorities will be invited to submit a full proposal. The full proposal is much more detailed, and we will discuss it in just a few minutes. So let's go into each of these items in the summary proposal. Project details. These are just the important details of your project, your overview, and the team. In the project overview section, we would like your project's title and the total requested grant amount. Now, it's common for an organization to request the highest amount available when applying for a grant. However, we want organizations to request the amount they need to successfully complete this project. Sometimes that's at the very upper level. Sometimes it's not. HSG is very competitive, and we want to help as many organizations as possible. So piecing together several projects into one proposal will decrease your funding chances. This is something we've seen again and again through review panels. The project overview will ask for a project start and end date. So just a reminder, each round of grants has an established start date, and the default end date will be 12 months for project grants. Now, you can move your end date up if you don't anticipate that the project's going to take the entire 12 months. There's no penalty for completing a project early, but you cannot start that project before the start date. You can't start spending funds on that start date. If you want to call up a contractor for a quote, or if you want to check the Gaylord site for any upcoming deals or things like that, that's perfectly fine, but you cannot spend any HSG funds. The project team will include contact information for the project manager. This person is going to be responsible for overseeing and reporting on the project, and it's going to be our main point of contact during the entire period. We do ask for the name and title of whoever is completing the grant application, if that's not also the project manager, along with information about other team members, staff, volunteers, any partners, along with any pertinent qualifications. So this information is going to give review committees more context on the project team. We want to make sure that we know who's working on this project and what qualifications they have that will help make this a successful project. The project narrative should provide a preview of the project and serve as the main executive summary. So this is kind of the heart of the summary proposal. You want to provide enough information to demonstrate that you have a logical plan to address a critical need and the resources necessary to put that plan into action with HSG funding. So the first question in the narrative addresses the project summary. This is a concise summary of the project. Use the space to talk about the need you've identified, your proposed solution, and the intended results of the project. I would stress that your organization exists to serve the public, so be sure to frame the outcomes in terms of who's going to benefit from this, not just your organization, but at large, who will benefit. We always recommend focusing on people, not things, when discussing the impact of your project. Review committee members are looking for confirmation that your project meets eligibility requirements, as we discussed earlier, as well as the funding priorities. And you want to make sure that your summary is thorough, but concise. Keep in mind that this is not the full grant proposal. If you are invited to submit a full proposal, you will be able to expand on your project plan. So keep the summary concise. There are several additional questions in the narrative section that we should look at briefly. First, we will ask about co-sponsors and partners. Partners are those who have, the way we define it, is someone who's contributed something substantial to the development of your project. Not every project will be part of a partnership. Many will, or at the very least, they could be. A good relationship with a community partner, it contributes to sustainability. So, consider whether there are opportunities to engage with others on your project. If you've identified partners or co-sponsors, make sure to account for their role in your description. We advise organizations to get letters of support from these partners to confirm that everyone is on the same page. Next question, building ownership. Organizations are not required to own their building or even have a building in order to apply for a grant. But if the grant project proposes changes to a building, there are some things the review committee will want to see addressed. If the organization doesn't own their building, the committee will want to see evidence that the owner of the building has approved of the project and they support the proposed changes. So let's say the county owns the building from which you operate, then reviewers are going to want to see a letter or other confirmation that you have their approval to implement changes, or what your lease terms look like, whether it's a year-to-year lease, pardon me, or if it's 100-year lease. We want to see, well, the review panel wants to see what that looks like. And also, it's important to address any easements or covenants placed on the building. So the final question here is about fund management. Reviewers want to see how the organization manages any grant funds. So they want to see that the organization has a process in place that allows them to track specific funds and ensure that all HSG funding is going to be used only for the project. So organizations must be able to present proper documentation of spending at any point during the grant award cycle. So that is important to keep in mind. How are you tracking these funds? We do ask questions about fundraising capacity. Although the review committees may look at this information to determine if your organization has experience managing grants, we primarily use this information for our own data collection purposes. This allows us to better understand the extent which organizations are doing fundraising. So my role as the fundraising educator, I am here to help organizations be the best fundraisers possible. So we need to understand what are organizations doing, what are they doing later. So we only ask that you answer these questions to the best of your ability. You will not be penalized if you've never written a grant application. So don't worry about this, just answer to the best of your ability. And this is it for the summary of proposal. We want this to be a very quick turnaround. So this information, it's what is your fundraising capacity, sponsorship, ownership, and the narrative. That's it for the summary proposal. It is meant to be a very quick summary of executive summary of your project. And that brings us to the full proposal. So just a reminder, organizations, once they've submitted the summary proposal, then they will be invited for a full proposal. So I'd like to show you, well, actually I don't, no, I will show you. I have a test one on my Google Chrome. Also a quick note that Google Chrome is the best way to use the Heritage Support Grant portal. So if you're on your login page, you would start a project grant here. And again, this is the test site. So the summary proposal is just these questions. You will determine which funding priority you meet. Do you own your building? How much have you raised? And that's it. So I'm going to cancel this. And then over here on the resubmit button, this is a summary proposal that's been invited for the full proposal. So it would be under resubmit. And this is where the summary proposal would end. But now you see that we have opened up several new questions. So I just wanted you all to see what that would look like. And with that, let's go into the full proposal. So there will be a series of sections on the full proposal: institutional readiness, evidence of need, project logic, implementation, evaluation, sustainability, and we will have additional documents. So this will also include the attachments and the budget. Every organization that applies for HSG funding is required to watch a 13-minute ethics webinar. So historical collections are held in the public trust, and they have to adhere to a field-wide standard of ethics. This encompasses accountability, governance, and other practices. So it's important that we ensure funds distributed by the Heritage Support Grant Program, which has been entrusted to us by Lilly Endowment, are being used responsibly by the organizations who are adhering to this standard of ethics. So it is a 13-minute webinar. The link to the webinar is on the grant proposal. If you wish to watch it now, well, not right now, after this webinar, you can do so on our resources page. You can go to indianahistory.org/grants, and then we have resources, and you can watch it there. And Tamara did an excellent job with this. If you have any questions about it, please reach out to her, but you can also reach out to your coach or me if necessary. Institutional readiness. This section is where you can provide evidence of your organization's capacity to successfully carry out your project. You want to prove to the reviewers that this is the right time and the right place for your project. So use this space to provide a brief summary of your organization's history and accomplishments, so reviewers can draw parallels between past successes and current project, the current project. You can also go back to your summary proposal and edit your project summary if you choose. You do not have to, but you have the ability to. So your current programs, your services, all the activities, all this is going to help reviewers understand how the project fits into the organization's mission. It's helpful to provide reviewers an understanding of your organization's role in the community, and in turn, how your community supports you. You may find that you might need to include specific information based on the project you're proposing. So a collections project might require additional information about your collections management policy, your accession process, or maybe your storage capacity. Building projects may require more in-depth information about the facility or the structure. So other factors you might want to include are personnel, paid or volunteer, and their qualifications, which would contribute to the project. If your staff or your volunteers have taken advantage of any special training, assessments, so going back to the planning funding priority, if you already have a collections assessment, this would be a place to note it. If you use professional standards, best practices, this is a place to mention it. If you have attended some of our local history services boot camps, things like that, these are places to mention in the institutional readiness. So just quickly, if you're trying to figure out what to go into the institutional readiness section, consider what background information is going to be helpful for reviewers while they attempt to determine the likelihood of successful implementation. So in the summary proposal, you gave reviewers an overview of the need you wanted to address. And in the evidence of needs section, you're gonna be able to expand on that idea and provide fact-based evidence to persuade reviewers that the need should be met through your proposed solutions. So make sure you've completely defined the situation or the problem, and provide context. Give reviewers an understanding of how this affects your organization and, by extension, your community. You may want to approach this by talking about what could happen if this need is not met. You'll also want to touch on how this situation came to be. So explain the cause and effect of the need, describe how that need was determined. Use objective evidence. So let's continue with the collection project. You want to show what the current state of your collection looks like. If you're proposing, say, a new collection storage, you want to talk about how you have outgrown your space and now you need new shelving, you need new materials to make sure that the collection is in the best care possible. Oops. My apologies. I seem to have frozen up. There we are. My apologies. The project logic section of the application provides the framework of your proposal to reviewers. This is your opportunity to go into greater detail about the planned work and intended results of your project. So this is what you introduced in the project summary section, in the summary proposal. So it's strongly recommended that applicants use the logic model template as a tool to help inform the narrative in this section. We do offer a blank logic model template in the HSG website. It's on the resources page. The logic model template helps you break the project down into 6 different sections. You can see here. So the plan work includes objectives, inputs, activities, and the intended results, which are your outputs, outcomes, and impact. This provides an opportunity to consider how the pieces of the project come together. If you'd like more information about the logic model, we can go into that a bit later. And my colleague Karen is a huge proponent of the logic model. And if she wants to add anything, she is free to do so too, because she can talk about it much better than I ever will. So the implementation section, this is where you can illustrate exactly how the project will be accomplished. In addition to a timeline, reviewers want to see that you've identified critical milestones in the project and that you've built in specific indicators that'll help you gauge whether you're progressing with the project as anticipated. This is a good space to talk about the roles and responsibilities of individuals on the project team and to identify who's responsible for monitoring the success of the project. So evaluation, this is a way to track and measure the changes that come as a result of all the activities that happen during the project. We often tend to think of evaluation in academic terms, but just by putting a few tracking measures in place, even the smallest organization can collect information that can be incredibly useful for improving programs, improving processes. So the goal is to put into place a system that allows for continuous feedback. You can't track everything, obviously, but so you're going to need to prioritize what you want to measure for this project. So when setting priorities, I like these 2 questions. What information do you need to know to make decisions? And how can you best collect and understand that information using the resources available to you? As you start working on your project evaluation, remember, this is not a test you can fail. Evaluation is a tool. The right way to do it is the way that allows you to collect useful information that will allow you to make informed decisions about how to improve the work you do. It is perfectly okay to start small and build up from there. And sustainability. This has many different definitions and interpretations. So for the purposes of HSG, reviewers want to see how this project impacts your organization's long-term goals. Is successful completion of this project going to set the organization up with greater capacity to take important next steps? Is the project important to the continued momentum of a larger goal? Are the project outputs, a catalog collection, a watertight building, a new educational curriculum, are these going to contribute to the organization's sustainability and or growth? How might the success of this project improve your ability to attract and diversify funding? Does it make your organization more attractive to donors or funders? Does this project open doors to building and nurturing relationships with new and existing supporters? So if you have a project that's going to bring in more class field trips when that's possible, that's something to note in here. If this is something that's going to appeal to the wider community, it's important to mention it. And budget justification. So This section of the grant application should correspond with the project budget, which we'll discuss in a little bit. This portion exists so you can explain your expenses with more detail than in the budget. You can justify their inclusion in the project. So while the budget template includes a spot for notes, the budget justification is where you should provide most of the details about the income and expenses. This is a good place to show reviewers how the calculations were made. You can, it's important to double check the numbers that you're providing with your budget template. So make sure everything matches up. If you are, say, I'm trying to find a good example. Well, if you are going to hire personnel to do digitization work, then you would want to base the pay that they would receive off of a standard. So that might be, it might be the federal minimum wage, but it also might be what is common for that type of work. And that will depend on the work, the digitization work that you have planned. So this is a place where you can explain how you came to those costs. Now, HSG has several additional documents that must be included. There's a mix of required and optional. We do require your organization's annual operating budget. We require the grant budget on the HSG budget template. We require a board list and a copy of your IRS tax determination letter. Again, this is not the state sales tax exemption letter. This is the letter that your organization received from the IRS to confirm that you are a 501c3 nonprofit. So we require the annual budget because it helps reviewers better understand your organization. So it speaks to your financial solvency. It helps reviewers put your project into perspective in terms of how it fits into your overall operations. The annual budget can come in any form that your board has approved of. You don't have to use a specific template or report. If your organization does not currently have an annual operating budget, this is something that you'll want to discuss with your coach. It is a required document, and your coach will work with you to figure out how you can develop that budget. The board member list, it's list and affiliations. So think of it as a useful tool. We hope will let organizations use to their advantage. So board affiliations can include social, professional, and philanthropic responsibilities. And all of this is useful information when you are looking for, specific expertise or networking opportunities. If your organization's applying under a friends group, you are required to supply a letter from the parent organization, confirming that the parent organization supports the project, that a member of the friends group will be on the project team, and grant funding will be held and dispersed by the friends group. So that letter would be put here in the additional documents. If you want to add a document, is this green plus sign. Optional documents, we allow up to 2 letters of support and any additional documents you think will strengthen your case. So if you have a building project, this might include contractor quotes, before photos to document the condition of a building, design plans, or a variety of other materials. So, whatever is going to strengthen your case. If you have pictures, if you're proposing a collections, say collections shelving and new materials to house the collection, a picture of your existing collection would go here. Perfect. Please be judicious in your attachments. So you are allowed to attach as many documents as you feel are necessary, but you don't want to fatigue the reviewers. it's so just please select the ones that will strengthen your case. If you do include letters of support, please note reviewers want to see letters that specifically address this project. Co-sponsors, partners, someone who is very familiar with your services, a program participant, a visitor, someone who's going to directly benefit from your project. These are the best people to get letters of support from. That's not to say that a letter of support from your Chamber of Commerce or a board member doesn't have an impact, but there are individuals whose letter or whose support will show the reviewers that this is a very important project. Now, I say that these documents are optional, but it is highly recommended. And I have bolded it, I have underlined it, I have put in a different color. If you have supporting documents, please let us see this. So the review panels, all they will know about your organization, your project, is what you provide them. And if they can't see what your building looks like and you're asking for $50,000 for new windows, they want to see what the condition is. So again, it is not required, but it is highly recommended. Now, the project budget, this is required. We also require that you use the HSG template. It's also used for the final grant report. So you can download this file from the HSG website. It's also on the additional documents, the budget, project budget bullet point there. That is a link to this project budget template. There are a couple built-in formulas for the budget, and it'll automatically calculate the 15% cash match on the second income line. So the project budget should provide a line item account of the expenses and the income. It should be detailed enough to provide needed information for the grant reviewers. But again, you have the budget justification question that you can provide more context. So you see that there is a note section here. You can say that you need, that you have based your prices on the Gaylord website for 50 boxes and unbuffered tissue paper. But you can justify that in the question earlier. Excuse me. So the notes section, this is a good place to include the descriptions, unit numbers, prices, item numbers, even colors, if you so choose. So the income section is where you'll include all cash coming in for the project. The first line should be the Heritage Support Grant request. So if it's $50,000, then you would put Heritage Support Grant income budgeted $50,000. Since you don't actually have the funds yet, you don't have to fill out the other two. The next line would be the cash match that automatically fills in. But then the following lines you can use to include any other sources of income for the cash match. So funds that you might already have in hand, any other fundraising that needs to happen. And then the expense section will list all the anticipated expenses. So again, you are only using the budgeted column right now because since you can't spend any funds until the grant period starts, you haven't actually purchased anything. Leave the actual column blank until you actually make purchases. So the balance at the bottom, keep in mind you want to keep that zero. So it's going to look at the total income and the total expenses, and you want to make sure that it zeroes out. You are required to spend all HSG funds, and if anything comes up, you are free to contact us about it. Anyways, some projects can include a contingency fund, so that could be a standard 5 or 10% contingency, so just in case kind of funds. especially for building projects or any projects that are weather dependent. If you're not sure whether you should include contingency funds, talk to your coach. They can walk you through it. Many organizations use the 15% cash match as contingency funds for anything that could happen. We've had organizations that have had building projects where it uncovered brand new issues that needed to be dealt with, and the contingency funds were a huge help at those points. So we do realize budgets can change. Sometimes things don't go the way you anticipated. Sometimes you get a great deal. Either way, you might have to reallocate some funds. So if you receive funding and you find yourself in your situation, I'll probably say this a dozen times, please work with your coach. Any changes over 10% of the total grant will require a formal request for reallocation. But again, this is something that your coach can help with down the road. The project budget can only include direct costs. It cannot include any indirect costs, overhead, or administrative expenses. Those are not allowed by HSG funding. Okay, so that is the summary proposal and the full proposal. When you're finished with the application, you've uploaded all the additional documents, and you are ready to submit it. Please pause before you hit that submit button. Review all the attached documents. Make sure that they're all in place and readable. It is not common that a file is corrupted when it's attached to our system. It has happened. So it's good to make sure that all the files are readable and that everything looks good. But it's also good practice to share a draft with the colleagues. A second set of eyes, especially a set that has not been working on this, might spot things that you've just overlooked. So share it with a fellow board member, share it with a friend, share it with a spouse, whatever might be the best option. You can also print your application and have that just for your own documentation. Once you hit submit, you cannot edit this anymore. Also, be aware of our due date. So the submission due date, that is a final due date. Applications will not be accepted late. So I had mentioned at the beginning that all project grants require a cash match and 100% board support. So I'd like to take a minute to talk about what that means. During the evaluation of our the first phase of Heritage Support Grant fundings, it was found that organizations with higher board participation led to long-term growth and success. So we determined that the requirement of 100% board support would meet the need for higher board participation while offering board members flexibility in whether to invest time or money. Organizations receiving project grants are required to have 100% board support in the organization. So if you have a board that has individuals who have the financial capacity to support you, but they don't have the time to do so, then financial support would be the best option. If you have a working board where it's completely a volunteer-run organization and most of your board puts in hours behind the desk, then that would also count. So it can be any combination of the two. If you need help discussing this with your board, we are here to help, but it is a requirement for the Heritage Support Grant Program. Again, this is in the organization, not the project. The cash match is a 15% cash match of, these are matching funds that must come from new fundraising. It has to be actual dollars. So this cannot come from an in-kind donation. It can't come from use of space, volunteer hours. It can't come from cost sharing. For anyone unfamiliar, cost sharing is when an applicant contributes resources such as staff time or equipment or what have you to a sponsored project. So the funds cannot come from your organization's operating fund or rainy day fund. So the cash match is calculated in addition to your total grant request. If you're requesting, say, $10,000, then the cash match would be 15%, which is $1,500. So the project total would be the 1,500 and the 10,000, so 11,500. You have an extended timeline which to raise funds for the cash match. You can start fundraising up to 4 months before the summary proposal deadline, and you have until the end of the grant cycle. So you have roughly 16 months for fundraising. We will want you to document the sources of your match in your final report, so please track your fundraising. And I would like to stress that I am here to help with fundraising. I am the fundraising educator. So if you're having any trouble with fundraising, I can offer assistance. But some organizations are further along in their fundraising than others, and that's okay. If you're looking to take your fundraising to the next level, I have workshops, I have webinars, and you can always contact me or your coach to talk about some options. Many organizations undertake project-specific fund drives, mail appeals to their donors, reaching out to the community in a public campaign, such as crowdfunding. Other organizations have had a few larger donors who are willing to provide the larger gifts to provide the cash match. When it was possible, events were very popular for designating the funds to this match. So there are a lot of options available to you. So you can also secure additional grants. Reach out to your local community foundation. We highly recommend maintaining a strong relationship with your community foundation. They are important partners, so if they would be a great source for your cash match, then by all means reach out to them. So whatever you decide for this, make sure you and your board have a clear picture of your fundraising options. Consider the first steps. What relations do you already have in place? What relationships are already in place? What communication do you have with donors? What are the benefits and risks of each of these approaches? So obviously right now special events are limited, but maybe you have some really active board members who would like to do some of the fundraising for you. So this might take some serious thought, but there are a lot of good fundraising strategies for everybody. So again, if you do need help, please reach out. Now, it might be tempting to gloss over this topic. None of us want to think about a situation where we don't have the funding we need. But I do recommend that you give partial funding some thought. So HSG is very competitive. We always get more requests than we have money. And so for this reason, reviewers often have to make difficult decisions. When the committee considers applications that are on the fringe of getting funded or what have you, then projects that are phased or that are very clear how partial funding can be useful to them, they're more likely to receive funding than proposals that don't give a clear indication of how partial funding would work. So please give partial funding some thought. So when you're talking about your project or your narrative, prioritize the phases. So if you have a new roof, then removal of the old roof would be the first step, and then securing the roof. So phase it into priorities. Have a plan B. so that the reviewers can make sure they know what you see as the most critical steps. The review process, we are very transparent about this. We have a blank review form. It is on our website on the resources, so you can see exactly how review panels will look at your proposal. All of the heritage support grants are reviewed by external committees. Again, it's history, museum, nonprofit professionals, representatives from local history partners. It's not me. It's not your coach. We have to step away. So the criteria we provide to the review panels, it's completely in line with the grant proposal. The projects need to fit with our funding priorities, present a compelling need for support, and the reviewers are going to look for evidence of institutional readiness. They're going to make sure that it's the right time and place for the project. They want to see a well-designed project with a thorough plan for implementation. They want to look at, they want to see a project budget that's both reasonable and complete. And finally, they need to see that the intended results are clear. They want to know what your outcomes are, how you're going to track them, and how it's going to contribute to your organization's stability. Also, no matter what, whether I hope all of you receive funding, but anyone who does not receive funding, regardless, you will receive reviewer feedback so that for your next grant proposal, you can make a stronger argument. If you receive funding or not, you will receive this feedback. And you can talk with your coaches about it, and they can help you for any future funding requests. So there are 2 grant reports for the project grants. The first is the Midpoint grant. This is sent in December, and it's going to be an email link to a Microsoft Forms page. It's a 9-question report. Just lets us see how the projects are progressing and whether we need to offer assistance. Then the final report, it can be submitted any point during the grant period once all those grant criteria are met. So once you've spent all the funds, once you've raised the cash match, once you have 100% board support, once you've met all the criteria, you can submit your final report. The default deadline is going to be two months, 8 weeks after the grant spending period, but you can submit it beforehand. Until the final report is received and approved, an organization cannot apply for future HSG funding of the same grant type. So if you have a project grant and you have not submitted the final report, you cannot apply for a future project grant. So the final grant report is going to look for information about the progress and the impact, lessons learned, future plans, education, and fundraising. We will also require a final budget. It is the same as, I don't want to go all the way back, but it's the same as the budget you supplied for the proposal. And all you're going to do is you'll fill out the actual column. You do have to spend all the funds. So it's also helpful to include any supporting documents, before and after photos, press coverage, testimonial from people who've benefited from the project, invoices. These are not required, but they are very helpful. And in addition to your coach, who's been assigned to you when you registered in the grant portal, you can also contact myself or Tamara if you have any questions or you need additional information. So our contact information is here. I'm going to turn my video back on in a moment because I need to, there we are. There we are. So again, I'm going to send all of this information out to everyone. I'll send the recording, the slides, and I'll send a budget document that I have. And at this time, I want to ask if there are any questions that y'all might have. Karen, has anything come up? Yes.
Nope. So I will join y'all back now too. I have not had anything come up in the chat or the Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop them in now. I know Bryce, as always, was very thorough. So it's also, I understand with the heritage support grants, a lot of times you don't really realize you have questions until you've actually gotten into doing it. And then that's what your coach is for. Ask us anything.
And Karen, I'm seeing your chat now. I love me a logic model. It is true. Karen is a huge fan of the logic model. And I was new to it when I started with this program, but it is incredibly helpful. And if you want to use that for your own project, it is only going to help. So again, that's on our resources page. Feel free to grab a copy for yourself. Karen, do you mind if I ask, do you have any insights as a coach that you feel that you'd like to share?
So the only things I can think of when you were talking, kind of sharing from the coach's point of view, is number one, I very much echo Bryce's comment to have someone else read your grant proposal, even if it's even better if it's someone who has no concept of your project, make your spouse read it or a friend or something. Because one of the things as coaches, we are happy to read your grant proposal, but when you send it to us, we want to use our time to help you in the ways that will be most beneficial. So that's things like reading through it and looking for questions the reviewers might have, so we can ask those questions and you can answer them before the reviewers even see it. We want to be helping you do things like that, making it a stronger proposal for its content. And I know myself and some of my fellow coaches, it's really easy to get bogged down in getting distracted and not being able to pay attention to the content because the grammar is poor or there's, a 1,000 character sentence that should be 4 sentences. So things like that, if any of those that you can catch beforehand, or even if you're sending us, an earlier draft and you're saying, hey, don't worry about proofreading this. Look at the content. I'm having, one of our board members proof it or whatever. But yeah, just understanding that your coaches I would say your coaches prefer to help you with content and not serve as proofreaders. So I will say that. And then the other thing I do want to say is we are here to be as helpful as we can be. And when we read your grant proposals, if you ask us to read them before you submit them, we're going to use all of our knowledge that we've gained through our past cycles of heritage support grants and serving as reviewers for other grant lines. Like Bryce said, we don't serve as reviewers for this one. We have nothing to do with who gets the money. But some of us serve on review panels for other organizations and things like that. And so we take all of that knowledge and we try to look at your grant proposal from the reviewer side. But that said, please know that we are not the reviewers. When we're looking at them, we don't even yet have exactly who the reviewers for this grant round are going to be until after we get all the submissions and Bryce makes up that review panel. So know that although we will do our best, that doesn't mean that a reviewer won't see something we didn't see. So just kind of know that. Know that we won't be able to catch everything, but we will certainly use all of our years of experience and helping you get the closest you can get to the most perfect application you can possibly put in for.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. Margie, you had asked, how do you get to be a grant reviewer? And really, we look for people who have, expertise in different areas. So when I typically reach out to potential reviewers, I'm looking for people who have expertise in a grouping of projects. So that might be building projects are one of the easiest ones to use for examples. So people who have a lot of experience with building projects, that might be people who've experienced it before, or people who have qualifications with historic preservation, things like that. But Really, we try and reach out to the local community as much as possible to make sure that we're getting representation from all over the state and all over the museum industry. They might be people from field services, they might be people from local museums, so it can be any number. But that's typically how we put together our review panels.
So in continuation of that answer, if you're interested in being a reviewer, let Bryce know. We keep a list of possible reviewers because, like Bryce said, we do like to try to make sure there's a mix of people who understand small museums and how they function versus larger museums, and just kind of keeping that general mix. So if you're interested, let Bryce know and he can put you on that list, and then he'll especially keep you in mind because obviously if your organization is applying for a grant in that round, you can't review grants. But that's another reason why we ask you for your board affiliations, because we also want to make sure that no one on our review list is a board member of another organization that might be applying and things like that.
Right, and we send out forms about making sure there's no conflict of interest, things like that. We send out training, we do all of that, and it is entirely volunteer. There are some programs that pay for reviewers. We normally, if it was before COVID, we would provide lunch. So it's a good lunch, and it's often there's donuts, but that is, so yes, it counts as a volunteer basis. Are there
We'll say though, it is volunteer, which is, definitely the way we work and the way we have to work with this grant program. But if you do have the opportunity to serve as a volunteer reviewer, it is very valuable because it will give you even more insights into how the reviewer side of things works, and you can then take that knowledge and apply it to your own application in the future. So it's a volunteer thing, but it is also a great learning opportunity.
Yes.
And in the same vein, kind of think about that if your community foundation is ever looking for reviewers for a grant line. Reviewing other grants will teach you so much about writing them.
Yes, it does. I have been a fundraiser for a while, and I've learned so much about grants in the past 2+ years. So if there are any other questions, please let me know. If you have questions for Karen, then you can, I'm going to just throw her out there too. But just let us know, and we will be, thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
And we will end this webinar if there's nothing else, but thank you all so much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing all of your projects, and I think this will be a great year for Heritage Support Grants. So thank you, and best of luck to you. I'm gonna stop recording first.